So in this video I'm at my hide location and I want to show the difference that I've made to the reflection pool that I have in front of the hide. If anyone's watched my videos before, you'll know that about 1.5 years ago I actually made a video on how I set up a reflection pool, totally different to this one, and I'll put a link to that video in the description. It worked well and I got some very nice pictures there and also video, but the problem with reflection pools is they tend to look a little bit, how can I put it, reflection pool-y. They look sort of, you know, really set up. I decided I wanted something that was a bit more natural looking. Now, although sort of when I had my previous reflection pool, I was trying to concentrate on all the birds to coming and drinking and bathing up the far end, so that when I was photographing from the hide it looked very natural, and I had grass in and around here, and you know, I got some nice pictures. I didn't want the birds actually down the sides, so what I actually did was to put some plywood along the edges, down the side of the edges, to actually stop the birds going down to that area there, because this is where I wanted to actually photograph them. It worked okay, but certainly the small birds couldn't actually reach water, but some of the bigger birds, things like jays and even the starlings, could actually sit up on top of the plywood and reach down to the water to drink. What I then decided was that I would actually make a ground level drinking pool. Certain birds are a lot happier coming to water that's on the ground than coming onto a table with a reflection pool. Certainly the ground feeding birds will come a lot more readily there. So I made this pool, dug it out, lined it with sand. It was 2 layers of actual sort of pond liner there, and I made it so that it looked natural around the edge. I put all mud around the edges and that sort of thing, and logs, and it worked quite well actually. It was only sort of quite shallow. I usually had it about 2 to 2.5 inches deep in the middle, but all around the edge it sloped in there, so the birds could actually sort of come down to the edge and drink and bathe quite happily, and it worked well. The only problem was it worked only for about 2 months. I turned up one morning and the water level was really down very low. On examining the liner, I just found out that what had happened, there was a tear in it. We do get muntjac deer here, and obviously what had happened, a deer or something, or you know, had been in there, torn the liner, and that was a case of really having to, you know, either redo it or take the liner out, put another one in, but then again it could easily happen once again. So I decided to shelve the actual sort of ground level drinking pool and come back to using reflection pool. But I wanted to try and make the reflection pool look as natural as possible. About 1 year or so ago I went up to Norfolk to David Tipling's woodland hide, and he has a reflection pool that looks very natural. So what I've actually done here is to try and actually model it on his way that he'd done it there. So now the edges, because I couldn't actually stop the birds coming to the edges, rather than where I wanted to photograph them here, they'd still come along down the side. I thought rather than actually trying to stop them, actually make it so that I can actually get natural looking pictures along the edges. So the reflection pool here is deeper. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches deep. I've put these logs, these wood, all around the edges there, so the birds can actually sit there and bathe quite happily. But you'll see that the edges are a lot wider. Now it's about 1 foot wide each side, and what I've done is I've filled that area there all with earth and logs and moss and that sort of thing there, and also up the end it's the same, about 1.5 foot here, and on a slight slope. And the idea is to try and get away from the classic reflection pool picture and to actually show more natural sort of woodland pool type pictures, but on a table. Now it's worked really well actually. The birds come along here and they'll drink quite happily. The smaller birds, although it's, you know, 1.5 inches sort of at the edges there for the starlings, blackbirds, that's sort of not a problem. The Goldfinches, the blue tits and that sort of thing, they need something to actually, it's a little bit too deep for them. So what I do is I put some stones, paving stones in the water. Just the water will cover it, but it gives them something to actually sit on there so they can bathe and drink quite happily without getting out of their depth. Now all this isn't going to happen overnight. You're not going to get this natural looking sort of effect where the grass, the moss and the plants are starting to grow there. It does need controlling. Before I do any photography, when I go into the hide, I go around with a pair of scissors and just trim it up so it's not too unobtrusive or anything like that. The only problem with this is that it does need cleaning out. It's basically a bird bath, a large bird bath, and it does need cleaning out sort of fairly regularly, and I usually do it every week or so there. It doesn't actually take too long. I can soon scoop the water out there. It takes about 3 or 4 buckets of water, but I've actually got at the back of the hide, I've got 2 large water butts there. So when it does rain, the water's actually sort of it goes into the water butts. I don't have the problem that I had with the previous reflection pool where I have to bring the water here. Now I can use the water, natural water that comes off the roof of the hide. It's well worth doing to make sure that the actual birds aren't actually bathing in mucky water or anything like that. So what I'll do is I'll go into the hide, show you some of the pictures and some of the video that I've taken at this location, and hopefully you'll agree the pictures look very, very natural. Although birds will come to drink and bathe at the reflection pool of their own accord, more will come if you provide bird food. Obviously, if you want to concentrate on photographing them at the pool, you need to take away any other feeders. One of the advantages of a more natural looking edges is it's easy to hide sunflower hearts and bird paste in amongst the vegetation and logs. When photographing birds from a hide, it's a big advantage to use a zoom lens rather than a fixed focal length lens. A zoom allows you to reframe the composition depending on the size of the bird that you're photographing. For example, you would need a different framing for, say, a small bird like a greenfinch than you would for a larger bird like a jay. I have made a previous YouTube video on the advantages of a zoom compared to a fixed focal length lens, and I'll put the link to that video in the description. All the images and video are taken over 2 sessions, and I use the OM1 Mark II on both occasions. On the first session, I used the 150-400 f4.5. This was fine for all the small birds, and although I could still photograph the larger birds, sometimes the framing was a little bit tight. Consequently, on the second session, I used the 40-150 f2.8 combined with the MC20 2x converter. This allowed me to still get acceptable framing for the small birds, but gave me the option of having a bit more space when framing up the larger birds. I have 2 woodpeckers that come in regularly at the hide. One in particular is very aggressive, especially if another bird tries to muscle in on its food. As this wood pigeon came close, I could see that the woodpecker was starting to take an aggressive posture. I hoped that the woodpecker may have a go at the pigeon, so I quickly switched to Pro Cap and half pressed the shutter button. I was surprised that the woodpecker started the fight, especially when you consider the pigeon is 3 times its size. Unfortunately, I had not left enough space when framing it up, and that meant I only achieved 1 shot where I had not clipped the pigeon's wings. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully it may possibly give you some ideas of how to make a reflection pool look a lot more natural. Please check out some of my other videos and subscribe to be notified of future uploads. Thanks for watching.